I remember when the Evolution of Combat update hit RuneScape on November 20th, 2012. It took the point-and-click combat style that had defined the game, well, forever, and completely changed the whole thing. For the vast majority of the RuneScape players, this was absolutely not the right call for the future of the game. It alienated them from the MMO that they'd grown up with. It didn't feel familiar anymore. The game began to suffer instantly and immensely. Did you know it took just about 3 months from the release of the Evolution of Combat to the poll that would decide if old school RuneScape should happen? Only Jagex could force a game update which was this catastrophically bad for their game. And if you remember when they removed the free trade in the wilderness, you know what I'm talking about. And it wasn't just the idea behind the update either. The combat was so bad. It was extremely clunky, poorly balanced, and the game changed in terms of visuals too. Again, just a slew of updates which no one really wanted. As time went on, RuneScape 3 became less and less popular whilst old school's poll would pass. Old school RuneScape implemented player-driven updates, led by polls, and gained a ton of popularity. Meanwhile, RuneScape 3 piled on daily, weekly and monthly commitments, predatory microtransactions, and disjointed updates which just piled on more stuff onto the confusing mess the game had become. Those initial moments of the Evolution of Combat and the bad successive changes that followed it are the legacy that still defines RuneScape 3 for so many players, and you really can't blame anyone for being critical of the path that RuneScape 3 took. However, you absolutely can blame people for refusing to accept that maybe, in well over a decade, actually things have changed pretty significantly. 2026 will be the biggest year for RuneScape 3 since the Evolution of Combat back in 2012. And for me, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I've done a few videos on RuneScape 3 reviewing its current state. And during 2025, playing RuneScape 3 on my Iron Man was easily my most played game. I mean, we still have a while to wait left before Classic Plus, right? And as the old saying goes, you don't ever quit RuneScape, you just take breaks. But for the first time in a very, very long time, I can actually recommend going back to RuneScape 3 for those who are now curious about it, because the roadmap for this game just dropped in January this year, and Jagex are hoping to systematically change, quite literally, every single problem that people tend to have with RuneScape 3. Even before these set of changes, I could have recommended playing this game on an Iron Man because there was no microtransactions, but following this roadmap and what Jagex are setting out to do, I could really recommend this game now for any player looking for a new MMO to try. So if you didn't know, on January 19th, Treasure Hunter has left RuneScape for good. Over 124,000 people voted in a community poll, which aimed to remove this microtransaction system, which had been a key problem with the game for so many people entirely. It took merely a few days for this threshold to be passed. So Treasure Hunter, or Squeal of Fortune as it used to be known, is an in-game system that allows people to buy keys and then open loot boxes for really overpowered rewards. There's even been people who have leveled up an account entirely through this system just standing at the GE buying keys. It's one of the worst microtransaction systems I've seen in a game, and it's gone. It's entirely gone right now. It's not there anymore. There are over 200 skilling related items tied to this microtransaction shop which are just gone. Jagex are finally acknowledging that this really isn't good for the game long term, and it's more important to attract new players via not having systems like this, rather than to try and milk out the whales who are still engaging with it sufficiently. And the removal of Treasure Hunter is really just the beginning. Jagex are investing heavily in a year-long integrity roadmap for RuneScape 3, addressing so many of the game's long-standing issues. So RuneScape 3 is getting an official plugin API before the end of 2026. If you've played old school RuneScape, you'll know about RuneLite. It's a third-party client with an extensive plugin library that fundamentally changes how people play old school RuneScape. You have quest helper, tile markers, menu entry swapper, helpers for bosses, the list just goes on and on. Old school RuneScape genuinely would not be anywhere near as popular as it is if it did not have RuneLite. And at one point, Jagex were trying to shut it down, by the way. This company and their decisions sometimes. Anyways, RuneScape 3 is also going to be getting its own plugin support built directly into the official client. If you didn't know, RuneScape 3 does have something kind of like RuneLite at the moment called Alt1, but it's not a client, it's just an overlay that you can put on the game, and it does help to some extent, but it's nowhere near as powerful or customizable. The community input to RuneLite has genuinely been invaluable for the growth of old school RuneScape. I know people who started old school at the end of 2025, and they straight up told me if the quest helper didn't exist, they wouldn't be playing the game still. Now obviously with RuneScape 3, this resource will take time to develop, and it will take time for people to figure out how it works and to populate it with essential plugins, but the potential here is absolutely enormous. Imagine having things which old school players have enjoyed for years now on RuneScape 3, such as improvements to interfaces, clearer information, activity specific helpers, quest helper, that would perhaps be the biggest one, and so many more things. This is just a huge win for the game when it eventually happens. Another thing which people commonly have such a big issue with on RuneScape 3 is the user interface. You ask people who have tried RuneScape 3 in the past what their problems were, and UI is always at the top because it is just an absolute nightmare. Or at least it was, because Jagex have redesigned the basic UI to be so much more user-friendly right out of the box, and you don't need to go and watch an hour-long tutorial from 3 years ago to try and make any sense of it. You just set the UI to classic, and it's pretty familiar with what you've been seeing in old school RuneScape, and you should be able to figure out what buttons do what. If you go into edit mode for the UI as well, you can also copy in another player's name and get their UI directly instead of having to mess around setting it up yourself. Now I will admit, when you do go into the settings, things are still incredibly confusing. Nevertheless, the basic UI is more than good enough for when you're first starting the game. You can use this, play with it for hundreds of hours, and by the time you're at 10 game stuff, you're probably used to it where you've set it up in a way that makes sense for you. So if you're seeing a lot of older players' UIs, they're probably overly cluttered in a way they don't need to be, and you should really base your game experience around this new classic one if you're coming back to the game. Another super good feature about the new UI is the auto setup action bar function. If you click the cog on the side of an action bar, you'll see the button. If you press it, it'll set up your action bar based upon the weapon that you're using, and you can pick between 3 different styles from manual, revolution single target, or revolution multiple target. Manual simply you're doing all the inputs yourself, and revolution is it will automatically use abilities in order, and these abilities have been ordered in a way that makes sense for the recent combat updates. So whatever type of player you are at the moment, this is good to use, and especially if you're coming back, you should absolutely take advantage of this feature. Also regarding visual improvements, the roadmap includes changes that address how the game looks on a very basic level. Jagex have already updated iconic free-to-play areas such as Lumbridge, Draenor and Varrock. These are places nostalgic to any RuneScape player, and in RuneScape 3 they had changed quite a bit, but they've dialed it back so it's a little bit more familiar and, well, it just looks like RuneScape again. And they're planning to target many more areas in the future. Alongside this world update comes something which I am so happy to see, and that's the fact you'll be able to selectively hide other players' worn customizations and animations at your own discretion. This also includes idle animations. So alongside microtransactions, RuneScape 3 had genuinely some of the ugliest cosmetics I've ever seen in a game. Also, the idle animations are just visually annoying to me beyond belief. The clue is in the name, idle animation. Your character is just sitting back waiting for you to do something with them, but some of them have your character hopping around and it's just so irritating. I unironically had to pan the camera so a box was hiding people with these kinds of animations. Funnily enough, when I was looking for footage for this, I logged on and instantly found somebody wearing an absolute clown suit with the worst idle animation override on, and you can see the difference when you toggle it off. One of them, for me at least, is a lot nicer than the other. Jagex are also planning to rework some armor sets as well within the game, which are just a bit over the top, such as the elite skilling outfits. Next up are combat updates, and these are going to be the biggest updates to the combat system really since the evolution of combat. This is kind of the evolution of combat 2, and it's primarily going to be affecting melee, ranged and magic, the core combat styles. Jagex are basing what they've learned off the necromancy skill and broadly applying it to these other combat styles. The combat modernization is about making the other styles more coherent and just more satisfying to level up and intuitive to play as you gradually level up. Because if you haven't tried RuneScape 3 since necromancy came out, well, I can tell you that essentially the only combat style worth caring about for the vast majority of the players was necromancy. It's significantly easier to play, has passive damage reduction and healing, and just makes a lot more sense in how you deal your damage as well, compared to the other three combat styles, which are comparatively super weak until you get to mega late game gear, and then they become incredibly overpowered. So essentially, I think Jagex want to smooth that line out and have all 4 combat styles feel good to play from a low level right to a high level. I mean, before the combat changes, if you were not playing Necromancer on an Iron Man, you're genuinely doing a challenge run. That's how much worse the other styles were. So after this update, you should have a lot more choice, which will be a great thing too. Jagex are also planning to remove auras. Now, if you're not familiar with auras, they are buffs that your character can get, and they're purchased through loyalty points. And you get loyalty points when you're consecutively subscribed to the game. Now, in-game, the difference these auras make are actually pretty big, as in they can give you 10 to 15% extra chance to harvest a resource when skilling, and for the vast majority of the auras, there's no way to unlock them in game, so you just have to stay subscribed and eventually earn them. It really was never a good system. Anyways, Jagex are planning to get rid of these and to turn the buffs that existed on auras into things in the game instead. The aura removal ties into the broader discussion of the overhaul of dailyscape. Daily tasks have been the bane of RuneScape 3 players for a very long time now. There are some things in the game which are just completely nonsensical. For example, with rune shops, if you need to go buy things on an Iron Man, they don't restock when you hop worlds. There's one stock per day, so you have to go and do the rune shop every single day. And there are certain vials for high level potions where you can only buy 300 of them a day as well. On top of that, you could easily do half a dozen to a dozen daily tasks per day on your character if you really wanted to. There are also weekly things to do as well, which are very powerful, and even monthly. Over the years, Jagex just added more and more daily, weekly and monthly scape into the game, and this was super off-putting to a lot of players. Following the rebalancing, they're planning to straight up remove the majority of the sources of this friction and just allow it so when players log in, they can decide what they want to do there and now, instead of having a checklist of things to do before they can start really playing. I mean, I know on my Iron Man, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, I literally have a notepad of stuff which I can do daily, weekly or monthly. Now, to be honest, I don't really do most of them anyway, but sometimes I get a few of them done here and there. On top of all that, here's a few more things that you should know about. Rune metrics will be made free to all players instead of being a separate subscription. This tracks things such as in-game damage, XP rates, drops and so on. It's something that's been behind a paywall for years, but now everyone will have it, so that's good. Jagex will also be updating the character models, a project they started years ago and now they're working on it once again. And the Grand Exchange will be updating how it handles prices much more frequently and accurately. Trust me, back when I was playing a main all the time, the GE was one of the worst things about RuneScape 3. It is comically inaccurate about 90% of the time, so this is super needed as well. But aside from the roadmap, and before we get into what still needs work on RuneScape 3, it's worth talking about what this game already did well, and the things which it was easy to overlook because the game had so many other problems overloading it. First of all, the banking system is fantastic. There are bank layout options. I still cannot believe they haven't worked out how to get this into old school. Yes, I know about the plugin, but when you have presets, you can just press a button and you're ready to go. Imagine swapping between your farming set, a set for a boss, a set for wilderness clues, a set for non-wilderness clues. It would be such a massive quality of life. On top of that, when you bank things from your inventory, they actually go out of the inventory slot you click instead of going from the highest item of that type in your inventory. Also, you can resize the RuneScape 3 bank much easier. Overall, the banking system is just so much better. The new skills in RuneScape 3 are honestly really good. The mining and smithing rework happened years and years ago now, and it makes both of those skills so much more engaging in my opinion. With mining now having a stamina system, and you essentially can choose to play more AFK or active mining, and smithing is more about creating an unheated item and then gradually working it, instead of just making inventories of kind of useless stuff or running back and forth at the blast furnace. One of my favorite skills in the game, despite admittedly having some problems, is invention. This allows you to break down items within the game for components, and then insert those components into gizmos, and then insert those gizmos into items for various upgrades, applying both to combat and skilling. For me, invention is such a genius skill, and it keeps the value of items high across just the game, because you're always wanting to break things down to make components. Old school RuneScape almost seemed to be getting invention light with the skill Shamanism, which just narrowly lost out to sailing, so maybe in a few years that does get added into the game. Skill progression in general feels way more consistent and just better in RuneScape 3 in my opinion. When you get to higher levels, you actually unlock things which have better XP rates and have more training methods. For all the things old school does well, you often hit your best training method around somewhere between levels 70 to 80, and then you just do that same thing until 99. It's efficient, but it's kind of monotonous. RuneScape 3 has more variety and makes those higher levels feel like actual progression, rather than just doing the same grind for no particular reason. Many skills also now go to 110 or 120, setting new milestones for the level cap and introducing more training methods along the way. And just to put it in perspective, by the way, level 99 is about 30 million XP within RuneScape, level 110 is about 39 million, and level 120 is about 108 million. So if you're getting 70k XP per hour in a skill in old school RuneScape which capped out at 99, if you were getting 3 times that amount and going to a skill at 110 in RuneScape 3, you're essentially progressing towards the maximum level at the same pace. So yes, in RuneScape 3 a lot of the skilling methods seem super crazy and really overpowered, but if you were getting 560k XP an hour in a skill which capped out at 120, you're advancing towards the level cap at the same rate as you would have if you were getting 70k an hour in a skill that capped out at 99. I think that's the best way I can describe XP rates not being always as good as they look. And with the removal of microtransactions, everyone's gonna have to be leveling up their skills in much more honest ways. And people act like this game is super fast and easy and you can be 99 in no time, but 99 is just another milestone. You're not level capped. Overall, I prefer skilling on RuneScape 3 considerably to old school, and I think it does a much better job of exploring this area of the game and all the different ways you can empower your account through these skilling outfits, perking up your tools and so on. And there's no XP rates bounced around tick manipulation either, thankfully. RuneScape 3 has also done a lot with quest and story progression, and that's another major strength for the game. RuneScape 3 just does more questing stuff than old school. Again, for all old school's strengths, they really haven't done much with the quests. How many quest lines have they finished off since the game began? Notably, in the quest log for RuneScape 3 you can put things in order, and if you care about questing in order you should absolutely do that. And finally, the combat, when you learn it, is genuinely engaging. It is going to be clunky compared to World of Warcraft because it works on this tick-based system and it has a longer global cooldown, but honestly it's not bad. And if you don't want to play with full manual combat, you can put the game on Revolution and it will just use your abilities for you, which is essentially the same as just point and click combat. And when ranged magic and melee are modernized as well, it should be in a much better place. That being said, of course, RuneScape 3 still has problems. Everything on the roadmap is going to take time over the course of this year, and I'm sure beyond this year. If they manage to do everything they've said they want to do in this year, I will be very impressed. Another potential problem is the information overload is real. Old school RuneScape absolutely has this problem too, but it has RuneLite. And RuneLite has made the game significantly easier to get started in, whereas in RuneScape 3 there's going to be a lot less hand-holding and a lot more wikiing. Eventually there will be plugins as we went over earlier, but if you're starting before them, then you're going to have to do a lot of your own research. As far as I know, pay for convenience is still in the game, and you have to pay for extra bank slots, for example, whereas in old school RuneScape you can buy those with in-game money. Technically you could just buy a bond and then use that for in-game money to pay for the bank slots, but there's not that choice in RuneScape 3, and I haven't seen on blogs anywhere whether this is changing or not, so I'm inclined to say that it won't be. Now, if you're just starting off, bank slots aren't going to be a problem for a very, very, very long time, but especially if you're playing an Iron Man, they will be eventually, so just know about that. All that said though, the year is 2026, it's been 14 years since the evolution of combat, and RuneScape 3 is finally making the decisions which are going to decide its future, and I'm genuinely excited to see them. This game has already come such a long way since the evolution of combat disaster, and I think a lot of people are just stuck in the past with their opinion on it, and they don't want to move on and accept that maybe things are different. There are some games out there which you're just not really allowed to like, and everyone agrees that they're bad, such as everyone agreeing that Dark Souls 2 is the worst in the Souls series. But maybe it's not for everyone until you try it and realize actually it's not that bad. Jagex is addressing quite literally all of the game's core issues over the course of this year, and they've already made a start on this and plan to deliver so much. And if you are considering trying RuneScape 3, I would look at the rsguide.com. It came out fairly recently and was made by a bunch of RuneScape veterans aiming to help out new players get into the game. It'll give you a bit of a push on deciding what to do within the game, how to train, how to do combat, and so on. Now, given what Jagex are changing, things may need a bit of an update on there, but it will be a better reference point than pretty much trying to work out things by yourself. And before this year, I could have recommended RuneScape 3 at least on an Iron Man account, since you weren't impacted by microtransactions. But now I'd say, as pretty much any type of player, if you've been considering giving this game a go, you absolutely should. And by the way, this game is really good as an Iron Man. If Jagex can nail this roadmap, and that's a big if because the execution matters, then RuneScape will be in a great place moving forwards. What they're doing now is this game's chance at redemption. After over a decade of being defined by its mistakes, this game is finally taking the right steps towards having a future. And for the sake of Jagex, I really hope they can pull it off, because beneath the mess of RuneScape 3, there's always been the core of a very good game there. So let me know if you've been considering trying RuneScape 3 this year since the updates, or whether you're already giving it a go. What do you think about the game, and do you think Jagex can pull off all these big updates? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.